Hi, everyone. I'm Bernard Advincula. I'm from the Philippines. I'm a researcher focusing on emergent technology, international governance, and government to industry relations. So my background is really in international relations and East and Southeast Asian studies. But I also have a minor program in data science and analytics, focusing on social computing and applied digital law and ethics. So in terms of my project, it's titled Multi-Agent System Typologies, an Asia School of Thought for Governance Issues in Cooperative AI Networks. So in terms of the project, it's a research proposal. So my project is a qualitative, exploratory, and policy-oriented research proposal with the ultimate goal of establishing governance frameworks for forecasted multi-agent ecosystems. So this work is largely epistemic, grounded in facts and evidence for an audience of public scholarship, particularly in the governance field. So of course, the concepts that I want to explore within this type of research is first, establishing different typologies for multi-agent networks. Second is, of course, to forecast their likely emergence pathways and the subsequent governance issues that do emerge, as well as the opportunities that do arise. So, of course, the typology is largely based upon how agents interact and communicate with one another, largely from the curriculum that we've learned throughout cooperative AI as well. But we also want to nuance it to their priorities in their decision-making. So this is rooted in existing literature as well. So of course, I'm coming from a political science background, and I'm trying to integrate these things in the context of network architecture. So we're looking at the question of what exactly does the nature of power look like when agents engage from one agent to another. But secondly, of course, we want to be able to identify the emerging AI social structures. And this is where the idea of norms and norm diffusion and normalization within multi-agent ecosystems becomes apparent, as well as the network architecture and what the implications are to technical AI safety literature or researchers. So, of course, the approaches that we want to be able to identify in terms of the general hypothesis is that there are two emerging approaches: the individualist systems or the collectivist systems, and the barrier between the two, which is a mixed or hybrid approach in terms of the ecosystems. So this is one sample typology that I have in terms of the general observations that I have in the existing, given the existing technologies that we do have, right? So on one end of the spectrum, we have chaotic systems where agents operate with high degrees of autonomy with minimal coordination, focusing on individual goals. On the opposite end, we have highly centralized systems having agents as nodes to a centralized authority. So think of like Hive technologies within AI systems. And everything in between, such as convergent systems, collaborative or coordinated systems, demonstrate different gradations within the spectrum of collaboration or cooperation. So in convergent, for example, I've observed that there's an emerging pattern of coordination, even though agents still behave as individual entities with their own goals. But some level of pattern coordination within AI agents could mean that there's some pattern of coordination or cooperation that does occur. On collaborative instances, for example, there's a balance between autonomy and community obligation, and game theoretic principles do apply within these types of things. But in terms of like coordinated, hypothesize that agents work in a structured approach, but there's also an emergence of a class of coordinator AIs who monitor agent behavior, and these exist within a spectrum. So these typologies relate to the approaches that we've mentioned or that I mentioned earlier, wherein on one end we have individualist agents that prioritize self-interest and transactional interactions versus collectivist agents who emphasize relational interactions and collective responsibilities. So that's the first part of the research proposal. But the second part is to really identify an Asia school of thought. And how do we establish an Asia school of thought? So we want to be able to identify different values within Asian societies and nuance how these things can apply within the context of a multi-agent ecosystem. So values such as harmony, collective well-being, relational, emphasis on the relational aspect of different agents. We want to apply these things on two levels. So first, on the micro level, we want to apply these values and frameworks within the ecosystem itself, governing the to AI and AI to human relationships. But the second level is we also want to foster an international governance and coordination perspective in terms of the Asia School of Thought, right? In terms of governing the AI ecosystem itself, first, we want to structure the ecosystems and prime them for collaboration. But second, we also want to integrate the drive to prioritize collective well-being as opposed to prioritizing an agent's own entity. Of course, this is always going to be domain specific. For example, it may be difficult if the nuance of the industry that you're applying the AI to is proprietary, or if it's, for example, finance, where it's really competitive. But we want to be able to fit that within the gradation in a way that it still aligns with, for example, the principles of cooperative AI. But third is we want to, of course, promote the concept of harmony in AI to AI and AI to human interactions. And finally, we also want to emphasize the importance of a relationship-centric design. On the international governance and coordination lens, we want to recenter and include Asia and the global AI majority for collective well-being, emphasizing collaboration. So we want to promote a global AI landscape where states play differentiated, complementary roles for collective development and stability. Why is this relevant? So in terms of the core problem right now that I've identified, there's a need for robust governance frameworks to manage forecasted multi-agent ecosystems from a policy perspective. So the current literature often overlooks how these ecosystems will emerge, and they don't often consider the socioeconomic contexts in developing nations. So there's a gap in cooperative AI literature that discusses what the iterations look like and how they will emerge. So for example, vertical integration within companies and capture of different value chains affects whether or not this is a centralized system controlled by a central corporation or otherwise. And this is significant for four reasons. It allows for regional positioning. It allows for human-centered governance as well. It addresses the policy anxiety of different developing nations or the global AI majority. But it also creates a strategic niche because an innovative like framework can help the global AI majority to find their role as opposed to competing on developing AGI, for example. The impact is clear. Of course, we want to apply a governance and policy lens to multi-agent ecosystems. But I think the most important takeaway from this research is we want to establish a foundational taxonomy in terms of how these things are likely to emerge. So that concludes my presentation, and hopefully it's not overtime. But yes, if you have any questions, it would be really nice to be able to hear them. Thank you.